we really want to take this kind of repeatable unit, help bring costs down, so it's more accessible to the wider construction industry, and to really provide a product that pushes CLT a little bit more towards the commodity. What we're doing is saying, here's some base sizes. Let's start from these kind of Lego pieces. And of course, we're going to fabricate. We know that the industry is still doing a lot of fabrication. We're not going to act like that's going to go away anytime soon. But how can we take 100% fabrication first to 80% fabrication? And then maybe we can even take it to 50% fabrication. And how can we keep getting people down those tiers so they have multiple options? And I think it's... Thanks for having me. I'm Michaela Harms. I'm the Senior Director of Mass Timber with Sterling Structural, a CLT manufacturer. The way I got into the wood products industry was so I went to university in Finland. I was not a student that was great at sitting in a classroom. I'm very hyperactive. And so when I graduated from high school, I was like, no more school, definitely not going to college. And traveled around and kind of worked on farms and realized how much I loved building. And then I ended up at university in Finland out of all of that, because they had a program that kind of touted that it was very kinesthetic, like you were on construction sites. It was really focused on sustainability, which was really important to me. And I always liked engineering. I loved solving problems. I totally grew up like hanging out in my grandpa's garage, like hooking things up to his old Bronco motor, like 100%. And so when I got to that university program, we kind of joke in Finland that civil engineering is really sauna engineering. And so the program was really around wood. I barely took any classes in other materials. Of course, I took like mechanics of materials, but I never took like really direct like concrete or steel classes, and was really focused in wood. And so our third year, we were required to do work placement, which I think is something that is really common here too in a lot of the universities. When you get to the co-ops and really get your hands dirty and start to learn more about the application of engineering, which is really the application of solving problems, right? Because I think a lot of them get really theoretical and people get scared away by the math and the matrix algebra and the indeterminate structures. But really, what all it's teaching you is how to solve problems. And there's so many people out there that really have that brain to solve problems, but may not be the best like theoretical learner, right? My husband's a great example. He's a mechanical engineer. I wouldn't say he got the best grades at all, but he can take apart an engine and put it back together, like no problem, even before he went to college. So he's an excellent engineer, but the traditional kind of educational style, especially in the States, can have this very strong theoretical. So what I tell a lot of young kids when they go into engineering is, you're going to feel like you're being hazed, and you don't have to get good grades. You just have to pass. Nobody's going to ask you about your grade later. Like, just get through the math classes, and by the time you start really getting to those engineering classes, you're going to have so much fun. So that's one big thing there. But so how I ended up in wood was I was in my internship, which I actually ended up taking back here in the States with a heavy timber manufacturer in Wisconsin. And I was doing cooperative grant research at the U.S. Forest Products Laboratory. And I was so nerdy about it. Like, I was reading all the papers and I was sitting in the library, and this is kind of embarrassing, but I was like looking up the retired people and finding them, like their phone numbers, and like calling them for like lunches, like ask them about their research. Like, I'm so lucky that I was in Madison. I grew up in Wisconsin, and I'm so lucky to be in Madison around all this brain energy around like really cool forest product stuff that we have through the USDA. And so that just totally, the bug hit me. And then, when I graduated, I was working in a life cycle assessment startup, and really enjoying that, having a good time. But I was ready to come back, and I was ready to kind of get my hands back dirty, working with wood. And, ever since I've stayed in the industry. Once you're in, you just can't leave, for sure. You meet all the people that used to work at Truss Joyce, and you meet all the people that have really created this industry. And I'm so lucky with all the mentors that I've had along the way. Um, and so I did a lot of certification stuff, some sustainable forestry, and now here I am working in CLT.
And so you actually work for one of the OG CLT producers, one of the biggest, but you guys started doing something a little different compared to what you're doing now. Can you tell us kind of how Sterling's evolved and what they're producing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So Sterling is like a third generation family company. This year at their 75th anniversary. They're old school lumber slingers, right? And then they got really involved in the industrial matting industry. So bolted access mats made from heavy timbers out of hardwoods. And they started to look at that product and say, I think we can be more efficient with this. I think we can have lighter loads on our trucks and deliver more material and make these big, long, 100-mile roads for industrial access. And so that's when in 2015, they installed a very high capacity CLT line to the point where when they were working with the engineers on their press system, they were like, when you would never need this much CLT. What are you guys thinking? And they're like, well,
Wait,
we'll take care of that. Like, don't you worry about that. This is how much we want. So our line produces a panel every 65 seconds. Like, it's so fun to watch, but it's these same rectangles that come out of that system. And then I met the team probably 5 or 6 years ago, and we were working on some factory production control to essentially implement some of the quality control around what we use in the structural industry through PRG 320 and implant that over the top because they wanted such an exceptional product for their industrial. And I joke with them a little bit because I remember sitting down at lunch and being like, guys, I've been in a lot of CLT facilities. Like, this is awesome. You got to get into structural. You got to get into mass timber. And, it was a little while ago when that was still kind of an infancy, like the industry. I think they're like, yeah, we're watching it. And then fast forward, we stayed in touch. And a couple years ago, we decided to launch the structural division. And we're having a lot of fun in a little bit different of a way than the other manufacturers out there in the sense that we really want to take this kind of repeatable unit and help bring costs down. So it's more accessible to the wider construction industry. So rather than really competing in what we would call the traditional mass timber industry, we're trying to compete in steel decking, hollow core slab concrete, and really get domestically manufactured materials back into buildings at an affordable rate. So, like, not just on the coast, right? Like, we want it in the Midwest and the South, and to really provide a product that pushes CLT a little bit more towards the commodity, and gets it into more buildings. That's the hope. I think we're doing it.
so I've heard that commodity repeatable solution talked about from a few different people in the manufacturer space and without. But it seems that so much of mass timber right now is like custom one-off type buildings. What are the challenges to getting that type of commodity repeatable solution in place?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to phrase that. So I think what it first comes to is any new product, like, the best way to do it is to get a really high margin. But where do you get high
Mhm.
margins? In, like, institutional, creative, custom projects. And so it's kind of like, I hate to use fashion or whatever as the way to describe it, but you start on the runway and then eventually it gets to Target, and, like, how do you get it down there? I think what's really cool in engineered wood products is we have some precedent for this. Obviously glulam is not, I mean, none of these products are really all that new, right? And we have incredible commodity glulam. You can go to Home Depot and Menards and Lowe's and buy glulam off the shelf, right? It wasn't there right away, of course, like, it had to make its way there. And so what I would love to see with CLT and what I think is a little bit of the challenge is once you start in that high-end custom space, it's a little hard to pull back. It's a little hard to then retrain an architect or an engineer who's been involved in a product where they were given this really custom, anything you want platter, but understanding that I was at a price point. So it's just what we're really trying to do is recreate some expectations And again, like I said, work from the other side of the industry. Can we get in with some projects that we're thinking about steel decking and have them think about this more repeatable product that's much more similar to that type of product? But you have to work at it from both sides. So what we're doing is saying, here's some base sizes. Let's start from these kind of Lego pieces. Um, and of course, we're going to fabricate. We know that the industry is still doing a lot of fabrication. We're not going to act like that's going to go away anytime soon. But how can we take 100% fabrication first to 80% fabrication? And then maybe we can even take it to 50% fabrication. And what do the projects look like at those different scales? So maybe there are some of the projects that are this really high fabricated custom type, and maybe we're not the right manufacturer for those. And how can we keep getting people down those tiers so they have multiple options? And I think it's a lot of education, a lot of precedent projects, and a lot of really working with excited teams who want the price point and understand what caveats they need to deal with to get to that price point.
Hey, we're going to get back to the podcast in just a second. But first, I have a question for you. Are you somebody looking to build a mass timber project? If the answer is yes, then you need to put together an experienced team.
Our partners at Cornerstone Timber Frames are leaders in heavy timber construction and have 30 plus years of experience, which means you can trust them to get the job done right.
They collaborate with Nordic Structures to bring you the highest quality FSC certified mass timber available. They also have some of the most advanced fabrication technology in the industry, so your project goes up smoothly without costly on-site modification or delays.
That means they have the experience, network, and technology to make your next mass timber project a success. Learn more about Cornerstone Timber Frames by clicking the link in the show notes below. Can you help explain the difference of panel pricing, or maybe how it can't be immediately compared to like a traditional way of like per square footage pricing, and just explain that so it's not so I don't know, it's just it feels like it's a big gray area of like, well, it costs, a single family home to, build this at 300 or $400 a square foot. Well, how come they don't translate kind of like the similar?
Yeah, I think we can get there. I really do. I think as we're describing, like limiting those extra services, because that's really in mass timber what makes it difficult to get to that number. Like it's a little bit of that. It's a little bit of lots of people are using different types of lumber, all the way from we really try to stick with visual grade number two, biggest supply chain, most readily available. Maybe a little more work on some of the sorting for visual. But, we try to work with this really commodity style product that's very heavily available. But you might have an engineer that designed it for E-rated, lumber, and it's an E-grade material. And now your supply chain's smaller and your lumber is more expensive. So, that's a huge shift already, right? So that makes it a little hard to say, well, this is your square footage price. So one, I think the more we get to standardization into what we could define as a commodity product, um, I think we're going to get closer to that traditional metric. We're not there yet for sure. So you have to be adding in, are you doing paid design assist where you're actually doing delegated design? Now you have a redundancy of engineers, and engineers aren't cheap, right? So you're adding a layer there, and that adds into your square footage cost. Are you doing a really complex custom connection? Or are you doing a really simple off the shelf connection? So it all really comes down to the design of how close we can get to this pretty simple square footage number, which is what we're really trying to. And I think actually most of the mass timber industry is like very much on this page of like, how can we train designers, help them understand that their decisions do really change like what happens in the manufacturing environment. So I think maybe more education on design for manufacture will help us get there. I don't think it's any of us trying to be like, coy about our prices. Like we're really transparent about pricing. It's just that there's more facets to it in this industry than in others.
Yeah, right.
And part of getting that apples to apples comparison or getting to like a commodity specification, mass timber is made up of a bunch of different species of wood too that each have different characteristics. Can you speak to
Yeah.
like what type of wood Sterling uses and how that might be different than others?
Yeah, absolutely. So our main product is a Southern pine product. We are very lucky in that we have very old relationships with a lot of the Southern pine mills in the South, and we're one of the largest private purchasers of Southern pine in the country. Um, and so we're on a rail line, so very cost effective and very low carbon transportation method to bring that material to our two facilities, one in south of Chicago and one in Texas. But we have expanded our product line. I mean, the thing that I think is so cool about this product is you can support regional forests all over the country and regional woodland economies. And so we just added spruce pine fir south and eastern hemlock to our ICC report and to our product line. And so you're absolutely like onto something there. Like, of course, the Southern pine, which is it's the largest fiber basket in the state. So it's cheaper. When you have more supply, things tend to be cheaper. But it's not the look that everybody wants for sure. Or they really want to support, New England forestry or potentially, down the road, different areas and different regional forestries. So price isn't always the number one thing with the lumber, but it is really important if that's something that you value or that you want to be working with a certain species. You've got to tell your engineer right away because you're absolutely right. They have different design values. So making sure that you're going to the product report of any of the manufacturers or directly to PRG 320 and being a little more agnostic and looking at what those material properties are and the availability of that product. That's another huge one. I've definitely talked to product teams or project teams that want a specific species and you're like, and want it in a certain way. And you're like, that product doesn't exist. Like, I'd love to give it to you, but it doesn't exist. So, I think what's so cool about this industry is we're really willing to work with each other. Like, I think, if an architect or an engineer, I have conversations about forestry and supply chains in that sense all the time and what the transparency look like. So the more you ask and the more you really start to understand, hey, if I really want to use Eastern hemlock in this product, what do I need to know? Like go to the manufacturer, ask them. We have great resources to share. And we have a great academic community, a great nonprofit community. We've got associations like Woodworks, there's so many good resources out there, but I think people have to know to ask because by the time they've designed all of it and specified it and realize, wow, this was all built out for a Southern pine product and I don't want that. Then you kind of get it yourself into a funny scenario. So I would say, when it comes to material properties and a yearning for a certain type of material, have that conversation early with your manufacturer and your engineer.
You talked about repeated mass timber panels or CLT billets or kind of more focusing on a specialized industry of the mass timber industry. What have you found like maybe some floors what size and scale have you found that was like a little bit of a sweet spot for your product?
Yeah, great. So honestly, like multifamily residential, great spot, right? Scalable. We would need to build a ton of housing. We all know that. So and usually as long as we work with the team properly, you can give a really good grid structure for our types of panels and for other manufacturers, just again, kind of more focused on that repeatable. Because apartments tend to be really similar sizes throughout a building. I actually also think like lodging and hospitality is another exceptional spot where we're looking at scalable development. So a developer who wants to make multiple of the same thing, because the more repeatable that we can be, the more we can really value engineer. Okay, how can we think about this to get you 100 of these buildings as opposed to just one? And then it also kind of takes out what we talked about earlier, that equation of adding in the design redundancy and adding in all those other things, because now they've been committed from the beginning. Like, I want to do this building typology and I want to figure out how to do it most cost effectively. And we've had some really great design teams and developers specifically and owners who are thinking in that direction. So you'll see more from us there for sure. But for sure, I think it's in floor, kind of repeatable floor decks in in those scalable type developments.
And did I mishear you a little bit earlier before we started recording that you said that there was a project, a multifamily project that penciled and like the pro forma and everything financially, like things went very well. It was all competitive enough. They didn't get like some big grant writer who whipped them, a half a million bucks and said, have some fun type
Yeah.
thing. Like it all worked.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's just capping out too. I've seen some like amazing drone shots of this project, but it's called Star Lofts and it's a mixed use building in Iowa. So like, I mean, you have to remember we're in the Midwest. So if things work in like Des Moines, Iowa, they're going to work on the coast.
Right.
Because very different mentality, very different markets and very different cost sensitivity. And it's with Cutler Development, and they've done a mass. This is their second mass timber project. Their first one was with mass plywood, and I understand that they did great job with that one too. And it's so cool and exciting to work with a developer who's really focused on making this like a repeatable, accessible building typology. One, because it fits their bottom line. If you're a developer, of course you don't want to have to go looking for grant money to make your stuff work.
Right.
It just makes sense to really sit down and this was a lot of fun to sit down with their engineers and architect and figure out, okay, what adjustments are reasonable to make here where we can value engineer this to the spot that you guys really need to be at. Because the nice thing about those exercises is we'll be honest. We'll tell them, we're not going to make it this, right? But they were really reasonable and understood the market and understood what they needed. And just an incredible showing of sustainability as well. They're very focused. I think they're going after zero carbon certification, but also to be able to use as regional a material as possible. From Illinois to Iowa is not a long trip and a low carbon journey. So I highly recommend checking out the Starlofts project on the Wood Innovation Network. I'm excited to see more from the Cutler Development team.
So, quick follow up question to that. You said that this specific developer has now done 2 mass timber buildings. Who is coming to you and saying, "I want to use mass timber"? Is it the developers directly, or are you kind of like a second stop in between the architects and the engineers?
So that one was the developer directly, which was really interesting and kind of cool. It's different every time. And I think that's pretty general in a lot of the construction industry, but maybe even more so in mass timber. We have champions of architects and engineers who just really like, influencing getting as many wood products out there as they can and have a great relationship with their owners to do that. But sometimes it comes from the other direction. Sometimes the owner is like, no, this is what I want, and you guys are going to do this. And so you never know really fully. I've had actually GC bring us in, right? Where the GC's like, I'm sick of dealing with these CMU shafts and having inspections every like 4 feet. I'm curious about this shaft situation. Maybe I can save myself some money and time here. So it's really cool in this industry. Like, and I think a lot of it again is like advocacy groups like you guys and Woodwork getting the word out enough that they know to come looking and they know to come asking. Sometimes people don't even know what to ask, but they're like, I know I want this, you know? And again, it can be all the way through the AEC community. And that's, I think we as an industry are set up really well to meet people at each one of those stages. And I think that's what it's going to take to grow the industry too.
For sure. And before we hit record, you were talking a little bit about some of your own advocacy work, getting people into the AEC industry. How do you think that we, as people that are in the industry, can reach out to maybe other professionals or even students coming out of school to look at mass timber as a career?
Oh, I love this question. Yeah. Very passionate about getting more people into the wood products industry. And I think a lot of that comes from just my own experience of being kind of like, at first, I really felt a little like a lonely young woman in this market and in this industry. And I have to say, like, it was, again, I've been so lucky with the mentors that I've had who have pulled me into a room. And so I would say that to everyone, when you see a young person who shows any interest, give them the time of day, pull them into the conversation. They're nervous. They don't know how to walk up to a big group of, people that may not look like them, maybe older than them, any of that kind of stuff. So that's a huge one. Even if you go to the International Mass Timber Conference, anybody who's been there from like the early ones to now, it's so cool to see how much that demographic has really like expanded and grown and changed. And that makes it feel accessible for people who want to get involved in this industry and in construction in general. We know construction is very male dominated, right? It's changing and it's so much fun. I would say I do a lot of work with the women in science and engineering. Um, I do a lot of work with academia there's certain friends of mine who are structural engineering professors. They like, I teach a mass timber class, and they love it. It's a lot of fun. I think the more we get exposure in academia, the more we give them like hands-on experience. That's one of my favorite things. The women in science and engineering at University of Wisconsin. I was working at a test laboratory and certification agency at the time, and for me, I'm a huge nerd. Like, how cool is it to just break big pieces of wood? And like, if I was young and I saw that, I was like, I want in on that. Like, I want to break something. That's cool. And so the more you can get them into these laboratories and into, we're so lucky here again with the USDA Forest Products Lab. I was working with the limited science engineering, and a lot of them didn't know that it was here. They didn't even know that that was right on their campus and available and accessible. As a citizen of the States, you have the right, to go and tour. It's really fun. So the more I think that we show that this is an accepting industry, that this is an innovative industry, that it's an exciting one, I think the better. Because I think we've had some dissonance with maybe some of the old school mentality around in wood products, being a little bit more diminutive and things like that. And it's changed a ton because we need more people. We need young engineers who are and architects and developers and even finance and insurance people, right? Like we need young folks who are interested in this market. And I think that we can tap a lot of them through their interest in sustainability. So I think the more we get out there, I know everybody's so busy. Construction's hard because we're all so busy all the time. But if you can set up an internship in your office, I've done that before. Do it. It's so fun. And even I'm sad I didn't quite catch this girl. She was a materials science engineer, super brilliant. She would have been amazing in our industry, but she's making like boat engines now. But she had the exposure, and so it's cool now that she got exposure to mass timber. She got to come with me to a CLT factory. And so the more we can expose people, because who knows which friends she told that about in her engineering program. I just like reach out to kids because they are excited. They're a little shy sometimes, but pull them out and show them some cool stuff.
Okay. Take them under the wing, show them the ropes a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
And so what's next for you? What's next for Sterling? What are you guys focused on in the next 3 to 5 years?
Growth. I think the big thing is growth. We're really excited about this industry and really excited about how we can get more and more timber into buildings. Um, you know, it means a lot to be able to say these trees are from the state, they're manufactured here, everything is domestic. Creates a ton of jobs, not only in rural regions, but also in our urban environment where our manufacturing facility is. Um, so for me, I think we really want to look to double every year. It's a lofty goal, but you guys have seen the industry. It's the trend is just growing. And I think that there's so much, well, I know there's so much demand. And so one thing that that I love about this industry is that we're all working together to grow this together because there's no one manufacturer who's going to be able to keep up with all of the demand. So it's just fun to be a part of it and to add a little more material supply to our region. There's been a little bit less of supply east of the Rockies, and we're ready to help fill that in. So we'll definitely be growing a lot.
Do you have any favorite books or podcasts or shows, maybe something educational that kind of got you, just changed your way of thinking that you'd like other people to check out?
That's a great question. I would start with, and again, this is so nerdy, so I'm really sorry to the people that aren't like into numbers and engineering. But the Forest Products Laboratory website and all the research papers, it is so cool to see what they've done there over the years. Like that, I can geek out there for way too long, and I'm lucky too because I can go to the library that they have here with all of that stuff. But it's all accessible online. So you can find, the work that they've done in heavy timber or the work that they did with trusses or all of that different stuff is just available because it's paper tax dollars. Um, I
And
also yeah, go
where
ahead.
do you can people access that?
Oh, okay, I think it's called FPL, so Forest Products Laboratory, the USDA Forest Products Laboratory website, and I think all of the research is under, I think they call it Tree Search, is
Okay.
what they used to call it. But you'll find it right on their website for sure.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Other resources. Man, I would say that oftentimes I think my favorite thing for really kind of like expanding my mind is just sitting down with a lot of people who've been in the industry for a long time and getting the old story. I love the old stories of engineered wood and mass timber and like the story of truss joist kind of changing that part of the industry. And really old school glue lam was used for like barns. I'm in Wisconsin. There were glue lam manufacturers all over making post frame barns. And so looking into the history of it that way and actually meeting people through this industry, who are still, in a lot of these companies and just sitting and listening and asking questions about how things have gotten to where they are. I think CLT, as innovative as it is, can really learn from all these other engineered wood products that have come to the market. And so the more I get those stories, the more I see the parallels and the more I see this product going from high end, niche, still incredibly beautiful, but moving towards that commodity market. Um, I also really love old log building books. So anytime I find some really cool old log building books, over here we've got a bunch of them just like laid out all over. So those are my resources.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of looks at mass timber sometimes as thinking it's so new and it's so exciting when actually like some of the foundations of what we know as mass timber have been around for 100 years, right? Like glue lam has been around forever, and then before that, like heavy timber structure was the original mass timber, right? And so there's
Yeah.
lots of crossover between the two. So you can always learn something by talking to the people that have been through that entire evolution. That's a
Yeah.
really great point.
And I
So
joke a
before we
little
ask,
bit. Oh, sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
go for it.
Oh, well, I joke a little bit because my husband and I built a timber house and it's all milled timbers and we did it with an Amish family. And it came all prefabricated, modular. And so it's so funny because you think about it and you're like, this isn't new. Like, these guys don't even use electricity. And it came, we had to organize the trucks, but it was exactly what we talk about as new trends in our industry of modular, prefabricated, pre-assembled structure. I think there's a really beautiful history of it all across timber construction to way back when. Yeah,
Of
sorry.
course. Yep, absolutely. So before we ask our last question,
Yeah.
where can people connect with you and connect with Sterling?
Yeah. So connect with me. You can go right to info at sterlingstructural.com. That comes to me and my sales team. And then also on LinkedIn, I know Brady and I sometimes have some good back and forth there with these resources and different things in the industry. And then sterlingstructural.com. Right there you can find a lot of our different resources. Our portfolio is coming. We're too busy a little bit at times and waiting for some really cool pictures on a lot of the projects that we've delivered over this last year. But yeah, and you'll maybe not at the Mass Timber Conference this year because I'll be inviting a new young lady to the timber industry, hopefully, or whatever she wants. But next year and the years after, you'll always see me there.
Well, absolutely, and we know you have a big, the same thing that my wife is about to go through here pretty soon. You're about to have a brand new baby hitting the floor, and so we're excited. I know you are too, and we're wishing you all the best health and happiness for that. Thank you so much for coming on
Thank
the
you.
show, and we'll see you in Denver for
For
the
sure.
Mass Timber Group Summit coming up, and the Sterling team will be there, so you can talk to Michaela in person.
Yeah. That'll be my first fun one back into the ring. So I'm looking forward to it, guys.
Cool. All right. Well, have a good rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.